Her name alone evokes 1,000 images: extravagant gowns, towering powdered wigs, the shimmering halls of Versailles, and the chilling glint of the guillotine. This is the story of Marie Antoinette. To some, she is the epitome of royal excess, the callous queen whose indifference ignited a revolution. To others, she is a tragic victim, a young woman thrust into an impossible situation, demonized by an unforgiving age. But who was the real Marie Antoinette? Was she truly the frivolous spendthrift, the foreign outsider who simply never understood the plight of her people? Or was she a more complex figure, caught in the eye of a cataclysmic storm she neither created nor fully comprehended? I am Dr. Amy Borington, and today we will journey into the gilded cages and the dark dungeons of her life, peeling back the layers of myth and scandal to uncover the truth about the Queen of France, whose fate became intertwined with the destiny of a nation. Our story begins not in the lavish courts of France, but in the heart of the Habsburg Empire in Vienna, Austria. Born on the 2nd of November 1755, she was christened Maria Antonia Josepha Joanna. She was the 15th and second youngest child of Empress Maria Theresa and the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I. Her childhood was one of privilege, but her mother was a formidable woman, keenly aware that her children were pawns in the intricate game of dynastic alliances. Maria Antonia, as she was then known, was a lively, often mischievous child, more interested in music and dance and play than academic study. While her siblings excelled, she struggled with formal lessons, particularly Latin and French grammar. However, she possessed an innate charm and grace that would serve her well. Her destiny, like that of many royal daughters, was not her own. The 7 Years' War had pitted Austria against France, but by the mid-1760s, a new era of diplomacy, known as the Diplomatic Revolution, sought to bind these former enemies. The ultimate seal on this alliance would be a marriage, and so the stage was set. Young Maria Antonia, barely 14 years old, was chosen to bridge the chasm between the two great powers. She would marry the Dauphin of France, Louis Auguste, the future Louis XVI. It was a union meant to symbolise a new era of peace and cooperation, but it would ultimately lead to a tragic end for the innocent archduchess sent to a foreign land. The handover ceremony, when the young Maria Antonia was handed over to the French, took place near Strasbourg on the 7th of May 1770, on a specially constructed island in the middle of the River Rhine. It was a symbolic and stark transition. Maria Antonia was stripped of all of her Austrian clothes and entourage, dressed anew in French fashions, and embraced as Marie Antoinette. It was a ritualistic shedding of her former identity. She then journeyed to Versailles, the dazzling yet bewildering heart of the French monarchy. The wedding ceremony of Marie Antoinette and Louis the Dauphin of France took place on May the 16th, 1770, at the opulent Royal Chapel of Versailles. It was an event of immense pomp and splendour, meticulously planned to showcase the grandeur of the Bourbon monarchy and cement the crucial alliance between France and Austria. The ceremony was attended by the entire French court, foreign dignitaries, and thousands of nobles, all dressed in their finest attire, creating a dazzling spectacle of silks, jewels, and powdered wigs. Despite the radiant display, a sense of underlying tension existed due to the historical animosity between the two nations. And the young couple themselves were reportedly nervous. They were teenagers after all. Following the vows, the celebration spilled into the Hall of Mirrors and the vast gardens of Versailles. But a tragic omen occurred days later in Paris. A fireworks display celebrating the union led to a stampede that killed over 100 people, casting a dark shadow over what was meant to be a joyous start to a powerful new era. Life at Versailles was a bewildering maze of rigid etiquette and ancient customs, very different from the more relaxed Austrian court. Marie Antoinette, initially charming and eager to please, found herself suffocated by formality. Every action, from dressing to dining, was dictated by ancient ritual. She struggled to adapt to this new world, and her natural vivacity was often seen as a breach of protocol. Perhaps the most significant challenge and the source of early scandalous whispers was the couple's failure to consummate their marriage for the first 7 years. The young Dauphin, just 15 years old, was shy and awkward, and he may have suffered from a physical condition, possibly phimosis, which made the act painful or impossible. This created immense pressure on Marie Antoinette, whose primary duty was to produce an heir. The lack of children fueled gossip about her coldness, her supposed infertility, and even scandalous rumours about her sexual orientation, suggesting that she preferred the company of women. This became a persistent, damaging undercurrent that chipped away at her public image long before the Revolution. Upon the death of Louis XV in 1774, Louis the Dauphin became King Louis XVI, and Marie Antoinette, at just 18 years old, became Queen of France. Free from the constraints of the old king, she sought solace and distraction in fashion, gambling, and a more informal lifestyle that unfortunately only alienated her further from the public and the court. Her fashion became legendary and notoriously expensive. She embraced exaggerated styles, most famously the pouf hairstyle, towering constructions of hair, feathers, and elaborate ornaments, sometimes depicting gardens, battles, and even sailing ships. These styles, costing fortunes, were seen as utterly detached from the suffering of ordinary French citizens. Her love for diamonds and jewels was also well known and deeply resented. And yet, at the same time, as queen, she was expected to dress extravagantly and promote French design. This she did with great aplomb, setting the fashion trends for the rest of the 18th century, both in France and across Europe. With no real purpose other than producing an heir, Marie Antoinette grew increasingly frustrated with court life. To alleviate her boredom, she developed a passion for high-stakes gambling during her reign, often playing far into the night. Her losses could be staggering, sometimes amounting to millions of livres in a single session. This was common among the aristocracy, but as queen, her habits were widely publicised and condemned, further cementing her image as Madame Déficit, a frivolous spendthrift emptying the nation's coffers. Her retreat to the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the Versailles estate, gifted to her by Louis XVI, was another source of controversy. She sought a private, informal life away from the suffocating court etiquette. She famously built the Hameau de la Reine, the Queen's Hamlet, a picturesque, idealised rustic village where she and her friends would dress as milkmaids and shepherdesses, complete with working farms. While perhaps a harmless pursuit of rural life for her, to the starving populace it was seen as the ultimate symbol of her detached artificial lifestyle, a frivolous mockery of their real hardship. These habits, combined with her foreign origins, fueled a vicious propaganda campaign against her. Pamphlets circulated widely, portraying her as a debauched, unpatriotic, and a morally corrupt queen. She was accused of numerous affairs, lesbian relationships, and even incest. Accusations often baseless but devastatingly effective in poisoning public opinion against her. The groundwork for her tragic downfall was being laid by public perception long before the storming of the Bastille. Despite the growing animosity, Marie Antoinette did eventually fulfill her primary duty, to produce an heir. After years of speculation and the eventual successful surgery of Louis XVI, their marriage was finally consummated. Their first child, a daughter, Marie-Thérèse, was born in 1778, bringing immense joy but not the much-desired male heir. This finally occurred in 1781 with the birth of Louis-Joseph, the Dauphin of France. Two more children followed, Louis Charles, born in 1785, who would tragically become the next Dauphin after his elder brother's death, and Sophie, born in 1786, who tragically died in infancy. Motherhood profoundly changed Marie Antoinette. She became far more focused on her children, displaying a tender, devoted side that few had seen before. She attempted to rein in her spending, adopting simpler fashions and promoting a more wholesome image. She commissioned a famous portrait by Elizabeth Vergy-Lebrun showing her with her children, including an empty cradle symbolising her lost infant. an attempt to elicit public sympathy and present herself as a caring mother. However, any efforts at rehabilitation were spectacularly derailed by the diamond necklace affair of 1785-86. This complex fraud involved a con artist, Joan de Valois Saint-Remy, who manipulated Cardinal de Varennes into believing he was purchasing an incredibly expensive diamond necklace for the Queen, supposedly on her behalf and in secret. Marie Antoinette knew nothing of the affair, but when the fraud was exposed, public opinion, already poisoned against her, immediately assumed her guilt. The cardinal was acquitted, further cementing the public's belief that the Queen was so depraved she could escape justice. This affair, even more than her genuine extravagances, irrevocably damaged the monarchy's reputation and sealed Marie Antoinette's fate in the public imagination as a symbol of corruption and deceit. By the late 1780s, France was on the brink of collapse. Decades of lavish royal spending, compounded by expensive wars, notably French support for the American Revolution, had left the country bankrupt. Crop failures led to soaring bread prices, pushing the populace to the brink of starvation. Louis XVI, well-meaning but indecisive, struggled to find solutions. It is at this point that Marie Antoinette is said to have uttered the infamous phrase, "Let them eat cake." This is perhaps the most enduring and damaging quote attributed to her. According to popular legend, upon being told that the French peasants had no bread, she suggested they consume a more expensive alternative, brioche or cake. While this anecdote perfectly encapsulated the public's perception of her as an extravagant and different queen, historians widely agree that there is no credible evidence that Marie Antoinette ever uttered these words. The phrase or similar sentiments had circulated in France for decades, attributed to various other royals and aristocrats. Regardless of its authenticity, the quote served as an incredibly potent anti-royal propaganda, epitomising the perceived heartless detachment of the French monarchy from the suffering of its people. This only served to fuel the revolutionary fever gripping France at the time. In May 1789, the Estates General was convened, a desperate attempt to address the financial crisis. This quickly spiralled into a demand for political reform, and in July, the storming of the Bastille signified the beginning of the French Revolution. The decisive moment came on October the 5th and 6th with the Women's March on Versailles. Thousands of angry Parisian women, many armed, marched to Versailles demanding bread and the king's return to Paris. Faced with an enraged mob, the royal family was forced to leave the gilded sanctuary of Versailles and relocate to Paris, essentially under house arrest. Marie Antoinette was initially defiant, but now she saw that her life and the very future of the monarchy was directly threatened. From this moment, she was a prisoner in her own kingdom. Life in Paris was a constant torment for Marie Antoinette. Stripped of most of her servants and subject to constant surveillance by the National Guard, she lived in a state of terror. Revolutionary propaganda demonized her relentlessly, painting her as the Austrian tigress and the ultimate symbol of tyranny and corruption. Her very existence was seen as a threat to the new revolutionary ideals. Desperate to escape their cage and rally support from loyalists and foreign powers, the royal family attempted a daring escape in June 1791. This was the infamous flight to Varennes. Disguised as ordinary citizens, they attempted to reach the royalist stronghold near the Austrian border. Their enormous, heavily laden carriage, which made slow progress, aroused suspicion. And at Varennes, they were recognised by the local postmaster and apprehended. This failed escape was a catastrophic turning point. It shattered any remaining trust the public had in the king and queen, confirming suspicions that they were actively conspiring against the revolution and seeking foreign intervention to crush it. For Marie Antoinette, it sealed her fate as a traitor in the eyes of many revolutionaries. After being returned to Paris, the family's conditions of imprisonment worsened dramatically. The monarchy was effectively suspended in August 1792, and the family was moved to the medieval Temple Tower, a stark and desolate prison. The September massacres of 1792, where thousands of royalists and suspected counter-revolutionaries were butchered, brought the brutality of the revolution chillingly close. Marie Antoinette watched as her husband was put on trial, stripped of his title and humanity, becoming citizen Louis Capet. And on the 21st of January 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine, marking a definitive end to centuries of French monarchy. Marie Antoinette, now referred to as Widow Capet, was transferred to the grim confines of the Conciergerie prison, known as the Antechamber of Death. Here, her last remaining links to her children were cruelly severed, particularly the fate of her young son, Louis Charles, who was separated from her and died in prison under horrifying conditions. Her own show trial began on October the 14th, 1793, before the Revolutionary Tribunal. It was a travesty of justice, designed not to determine guilt, but to condemn her. The accusations ranged from treason and conspiracy against the state for her alleged communication with foreign enemies, to more grotesque and baseless charges, including incest with her son. This vile accusation was intended to utterly dehumanize her. Marie Antoinette, though, frail and prematurely aged by suffering, faced her accusers with remarkable dignity and defiance, famously appealing to the mothers in the audience when accused of incest. Despite her eloquent defence, the verdict was never in doubt. On October the 16th, 1793, Marie Antoinette was found guilty and condemned to death. During her last few hours, Marie Antoinette composed a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, affirming her clear conscience, her Catholic faith, and her love and her concern for her children. The letter never reached Elizabeth. Then she was given a plain white gown, a stark contrast to the silks and satins of her former life. Her hands were roughly bound behind her back, a humiliating gesture for a queen, and her famous hair was unceremoniously shorn by the executioner's assistant. And then at around 11 a.m, she was led out to a tumbrel, a simple open cart used for criminals, rather than a closed carriage, ensuring maximum public humiliation. The journey from her prison to her place of execution was a slow, agonizing procession through the streets, thronged with the ferocious, jeering mob. She remained remarkably composed, her gaze seemingly distant, meeting the hatred with an almost ethereal calm, though some accounts mention a flicker of defiance or a resigned acceptance in her eyes. The 90-minute ride was a gauntlet of insults and cries for her death, but no cry, no sign of weakness escaped her lips. Upon reaching the place of her execution, the massive, ominous silhouette of the guillotine dominated the scene. It was a cold, blustery day. She stepped down from the cart, reportedly accidentally treading on the executioner's foot and calmly uttering, "Monsieur, I beg your pardon, I did not do it on purpose." With an unbowed head, she ascended the steps of the scaffold, taking a last sweeping look about her. She was placed on the plank, and in an instant the blade fell, ending the life of the last Queen of France. She became a potent symbol for both sides, for monarchists a martyr to the cause of legitimate kingship, for revolutionaries the ultimate embodiment of aristocratic corruption. The let them eat cake myth, her extravagant fashion, the diamond necklace affair all cemented a public image of a queen completely out of touch, a perfect scapegoat for the revolution's fury. Yet, beneath the layers of scandal and propaganda lies the story of a complex woman caught in a storm she could not control. Her final months of courage and resilience in the face of unspeakable cruelty have also become part of her enduring myth. Marie Antoinette remains the ultimate queen of paradox. From the vivacious Austrian archduchess to the extravagant Dauphine, the misunderstood queen, and finally the defiant widow facing the guillotine, Marie Antoinette's life was a whirlwind of shifting fortunes and relentless public scrutiny. She was a product of her time and her aristocratic bringing, perhaps ill-equipped for the seismic shifts occurring in France. But she was also a woman who matured through suffering, displaying surprising courage in her final days. Her story is a cautionary tale of monarchy's perils, the destructive power of propaganda, and the tragic consequences of a society in upheaval. Whether seen as a victim or a villain, Marie Antoinette continues to fascinate, a potent symbol of beauty, tragedy, and the undying allure of a queen whose life became the ultimate sacrifice on the altar of revolution. Thank you so much for joining me today as I deep dived into the extraordinary life of Marie Antoinette. If you found this journey insightful, please of course like, share and subscribe. And as ever, let me know, who would you like me to cover next?